1787, a prominent Philadelphia woman asked Ben Franklin, "Doctor, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" His famous reply, "A republic, if you can keep it."
That explainer from 60 Minutes came just days after the insurrection at the Capitol back in 2021. Now, more than 200 years after the Constitutional Convention and amid the Trump administration's efforts to undermine trust in elections, a nonpartisan civic education organization known as Keep Our Republic is pledging to do just that. Joining us now, two members of that group. Former Chief Justice of the Hawaii Supreme Court, Mark E. Rechtenwald, who serves on the organization's Alliance of Former Chief Justices, and former Republican Congressman James Ribble of Wisconsin. He is a member of the bipartisan Wisconsin Advisory Council. Our thanks to you both for being here. Mr. Chief Justice, I'll start with you. Why is there such urgency to launch this right now?
Well, for a couple of reasons. First, I mean, the elections are coming, and I think we need to build trust and confidence among the public. And secondly, from my point of view, we need to emphasize to the public the independence of the courts, the importance of the rule of law, and that judges decide cases based on the law and the facts. They're not partisans. And so the courts have had a very important role to play, and folks should be confident that they will get a fair shake when they come in front of our courts, and that we'll apply the law and not be partisans.
So, Congressman Ribble, you co-authored a piece for Time with former Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett titled, "We're Conservative Republicans. The SAVE Act is a Mistake." In it, you co-write in part this: real election integrity requires accuracy. It requires transparency. It requires telling voters what is true, even when the truth is less politically useful than the fear. We believe Republicans can be the party of secure elections, limited federal power, competent administration, and personal responsibility. The Save America Act, as written, does not live up to those principles. The American people deserve election laws that make it easy to vote and hard to cheat. Election confidence is built by facts, transparency, and trustworthy administration, not by panic, paperwork, and political ultimatums. It's okay. Molly, I mean, that's what's seemingly a non-controversial point, but yet we're not hearing it from all that many Republicans.
Yeah, and my question is for the congressman, the former congressman, why are we not hearing this from more Republicans? Like, obviously, this is a real issue. There's a lot of anxiety about these midterms. It does not necessarily serve either party to feel that the elections are somehow in peril. Why do you think there's not more speaking out about this?
Well, ultimately, I think we're living in an era of populist outrage, and the outrage machine starts moving people for political advantage. And we're also living in an era of extreme tribalism, where the party identification is more important than a principal identification. And one of the reasons that Governor Corbett and I wanted to write that op-ed is because we wanted to let the American people know that you can have confidence in your elections. And I stop and think about, when you go and cast your vote, who are you likely to see? Some senior citizen from your community who's checking your ID, who's checking you in, making sure you're from the address you claim you're from, and doing all the safeguards that are typical for elections. And our message is, don't really trust the politicians, but trust your neighbor. And our elections are safe and secure right now. And so let's not discourage people from voting by telling people that they're not safe.
Chief Justice Rechtenwald, I'm curious, as you sat and watched Donald Trump give his primetime address on election security the other night, what your main takeaways from it were, and in a kind of tangible way, whether you kind of share the kind of ambient sense of concern that a lot of Democrats have that by the time we get to November, that the president himself is going to be trying to put his thumb on the scale in some way and interfering with the election outcomes in the midterms.
Well, certainly there have been a lot of developments in the last month that are cause for concern, from the FBI, hundreds of FBI agents reviewing records from Georgia to various attempts to keep people from being able to vote, to getting voting records from various states. So there's a whole lot going on, and I think we're about at the time when folks are really going to begin to focus in as we enter the fall season and Labor Day. So to me, I think everybody needs to be ready. We need to think through where we are. We need to prepare. And I think that's been happening. And I'd echo what the congressman says. We have a strong electoral system in this country. It's not perfect. We can always work to improve it. But the folks who are in these states have worked hard to get ready for this election, to be able to have relatively clean voter rolls, to make sure they're as up to date and accurate as possible. And I think if the courts are called on to step in, they're going to be neutral and fair, just like they should be, and not be partisans. It won't matter if the judge was appointed by a Republican or a Democrat. They'll call it like they see it. And I think that's a critical message for people to hear.
Congressman, hi, it's Peter Baker from the New York Times. There's a strain of thinking on the left, and maybe even from other Trump critics, that there's something going on here from the president that goes beyond simply discrediting elections or causing, suspicion in elections, that he's actually laying the groundwork for potentially doing something more direct in the fall should the vote not go his way. And that may seem overly paranoid, but on the other hand, he told my colleagues in an interview in January that he regretted not ordering the National Guard to seize voting machines in 2020 in states that he lost. And I'm curious what you think the public should think of that. Is there a concern that these elections might not be carried out free of interference from the White House?
Well, certainly that's a concern, but I don't know that anybody can really get into President Trump's head at any given moment of time, and I don't really feel that I can do it. But I can say this: if anybody thinks that it's better for the federal government to manage voter rolls, just stop and think. The Department of Homeland Security has been responsible for managing E-Verify for employers to check whether a candidate for work is legal to be in the country. And they have, since 2002, they still have a 50% miss rate. And so where they say someone is legal, but they're not. And so to turn it over to the federal government doesn't make any sense to me when the states have already shown that the system already works. And I think the president's going to say what the president's going to say at any given moment of time. And my message is that all that does is engender fear and lack of confidence. And if you think your vote is going to be stolen, as it were, why would you go vote at all? And so I think that just serves to suppress the vote rather than actually encourage people to go out and vote and exercise their democratic responsibility.
Members of the Keep Our Republic organization, former Chief Justice Mark E. Rechtenwald and former Republican Congressman Reed Ribble of Wisconsin, thank you both very much for being with us, but also for this important work.
Great to be with you.
So, John Hammond, this is obviously a timely conversation. The president, just a week or so, used the White House, primetime address, to make completely spurious claims, no evidence whatsoever, about the 2020 election. And yeah, he's a sore loser there. But it's more than that. It's about setting up 2026, potentially 2028, to if not outright meddle, but at the very least, cast results in doubt if he doesn't like them. And he undermining the faith of our elections that's the fundamental tenet of our democracy. It's very, very troubling.
Yeah, and when it comes to the tangible fears that people have, Trump telegraphs a lot of punches that he doesn't then throw, but every punch that he does throw is one that he's telegraphed. So it's like you have to take him seriously when you hear the consistency with which he talks about this suggests that you'd be nuts not to take seriously, Molly, the possibility that the president has some plan or at least an impulse to try to actively interfere in the election. And Peter Baker made the point a second ago, which is, again, worth reminding people that, he said on the record to the New York Times that he regrets that he didn't seize the ballot box in 2020. And the thing that I think about here is all of the Democrats that you and I and Jonathan talked to, who for the last year have been saying, we have to take Trump seriously. They have a meta conversation about we have to take this seriously. But then they don't really seem like they're doing anything. And finally, this week, Chuck Schumer started calling these closed-door sessions on the Hill where he's kind of like, let's start doing some wargaming on these doomsday scenarios. Do you feel like Democrats, although there's like a consensus that this is a real threat that Trump will try to interfere, do you feel as though they're actually doing the things that they need to do to get ready to fight back?
I think that there are a lot of nonpartisan voter organizations that are ready to take all of this to court. And I think that they have learned a lot with previous. This administration does very poorly in court, usually, because a lot of the stuff.
Because they're bad lawyers, for one thing. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of the stuff they're trying to do is not legal.
Yeah.
And so the courts say, no, you can't do that. And so I think that is something real.